Well, good afternoon and welcome to MedTech Crossroads. It is Friday, December 11th. 2 Fridays left now before the holidays. Episode 38. Today, my guest, Jeff Rinvelt with Renaissance Venture Capital and Michigan Venture Capital Association. But right before that, we're going to talk about the latest in COVID numbers, as we always do. And here's that nationwide currently hospitalized number, climbing steadily, maybe trending over the top, but we're not there yet in terms of nationwide hospitalizations. First indications, though, of some good news in Michigan with the current hospitalizations as well as the cases starting to top off a little bit. We hope that holds, but this is the first indication we've had of that stabilizing. So some good news as we go into the holidays coming up here. Also wanted to show you this graph by region. And you recall back in the spring, we were looking at the Northeast just being overwhelmed. And that certainly is still a true story back from the spring. In the summer, you remember the South being overwhelmed, that big peak on the third chart. And right now, what we're seeing is all the regions. It's only the Midwest, in fact, that is seeing any relief at this point. Hospitalizations just starting to come down. But in the Northeast, the South, and the West, they continue to climb, which does present an issue. Here's the Michigan PPE and bed tracking list, or at least the bed tracking part of it. And again, nothing absolutely terrifying here. The numbers do in the Midwest seem to just be starting to come down, but we do know that some hospitals locally have been overwhelmed, just like they were in the spring as well. So not uniformly great news, but hopeful in that some of those hospitalizations are starting to come over the top from the look of it. So we're excited by that. And I was just talking with our guest, Jeff, earlier, and he mentioned that the news last night had the trucks rolling out of Kalamazoo with the vaccine on it on the national news last night. So thanks, Jeff, for that. But that's a cool development, and a Michigan development at that. So we're thankful for that. And speaking of Jeff Rinvelt, I want to welcome Jeff Rinvelt to the show. Jeff is a principal with Renaissance Venture Capital and is live with us today. Jeff, are you there?
I'm here. Thanks for having me, Gene.
Thanks for being here. He made it. It was a long walk, but you had to make it to the office today.
I did, exactly. It's pretty hard coming out into my sunroom, exactly.
We love it, and I love the addition of the sign in the back and the lava lamps. We're going to have to get to the stories behind those at some point, but got to do a little intro here for Jeff. Jeff is a principal at Renaissance Venture Capital, a VC firm that not only invests in individual businesses, but it also in other VCs, which is a really interesting thing we're going to be talking about today. Jeff's also the vice chairman of the Michigan Venture Capital Association. And before Renaissance, Jeff was a director at Ardesta, life sciences and IT fund that Michigan's former Governor Rick Snyder was part of. And before that, Jeff was a VP at Max Funds. And going way back in the day, I understand, Jeff, that you had actually worked with a company doing patient records.
I did. It was called MedCard, and actually that was another fund called Avalon was an investor in that. So yes, I did that. Not all of them can be hits. We know that in our industry.
Well, and it's so fascinating because those patient records are still with us today, and they're still a hot topic, and something that really in the MedTech sector keeps getting attention, because there's this line between where does the medical device start and where does the record sort of end. It's a really fascinating thing, but I hadn't realized that till you and I had been talking. Well, you've been in this community for a long time. You've seen a lot of things, Jeff, and for some reason you keep doing it. You volunteer in different ways. You mentor people as well, which I think is fascinating, because you're investing largely in VCs and working largely with VCs, but you do get in there and you mentor entrepreneurs. So you've got a very wide swath of the world that you look at. And the question I always love to ask people is, why on earth would you do it? You've learned better. You know better than this, Jeff. Why are you still here? What's going on, man? What's your passion? Why do you do this?
That's a pretty easy question. But first of all, I want to thank you, Gene, for having me on. And I know we'll get to it, but this is great. I mean, what you're doing is building community around Michigan, and especially around the MedTech, the med device arena, which is sorely needed. So I appreciate you doing this, and I know it's not your day job, so I appreciate you doing this. But why I do it personally is that, when I graduated from Western Michigan University back in the 90s, there really wasn't an entrepreneurial community around in Michigan. And I, sort of looked around, and that's what I wanted to do. And I didn't have that. So, once I started, getting into startups and found my way into startups after a long, tenuous path and loved it, I wanted to make sure that my kids and the kids graduating now had an opportunity to go into that. And so it's been mostly around, okay, I'll work at startups first, I'll work at venture capital firms, and then now at a fund of funds, it's been a way to basically maximize those dollars that we get to put back into work, and basically put a bigger lever to make more jobs in Michigan in the entrepreneurial community. So that's my answer.
That's a huge vision, though. It's great because we often talk about jobs, and we often are thankful for the jobs that we have, but to be in that area where, okay, how are we going to structure this so that we can create good, meaningful, productive, value-making jobs that contribute to the investors and contribute to society? That's a huge thing. Well, that's what you're doing at Renaissance, and I think we need to give people a little bit of a background. I think for many listeners, they hear the word investor, and oftentimes the distinctions don't break down. And of course, even among VCs, what Renaissance is doing is unique. So can you give us a little bit of the history of the company, how you guys came up with the idea, and really what it is?
Yeah, so Renaissance started off as a fund of funds. So what that means is, people don't know this all the time, but venture capitalists also have to raise capital, and they raise a fund basically, and they raise it from limited partners. And a lot of times those limited partners are high net worth individuals, endowments, a lot of your retirement, money is invested in venture, sometimes in venture capital, and those are large investors. But what we did, interesting enough, was we actually started with just all corporate LPs in Michigan as it, and that was the vision from Business Leaders of Michigan. And we, my partner and I, Chris Ryzik, took that idea that was sitting there in a good fund that was already raised, and took that and started running it for the last 12 years now. So what our innovation was is saying, these corporations, may have venture capital firms, may not, but this is a great way to sort of, give back to the community in Michigan, but also connect them to the innovation economy that's in Michigan, and really, help their corporations out and basically give back to them. So this has been, now there's a couple other sister funds that we have. There's one in Cincinnati called Centrifuge, and there's another one called in Houston called Houston Exponential. And then we're hoping there's actually one in Wisconsin that's just starting to get off the ground and is looking good. But we talk to everybody sort of about this model because it's a great way to, the corporations get benefits, the local economy gets benefits, everybody gets jobs. And it's not something that's and again, we're focused on making money. This is still, not altruistic at all. But we think that you can do well and do good at the same time.
That's really cool. Now, you said you started out entirely with corporate LPs. Is that still your investor mix, or do you have like high net worth individuals as a part of that now?
No, we've definitely expanded out. There's usually the high net worth individuals have connections back into the corporation, so that's a good way of us to sort of make those connections deeper. But what's happened is as you mature and sort of have a track record and say, hey, look, we can do this and really make money, we've actually had more of those traditional investors. So the endowments and large pots of money basically are now also investors. And also we've got universities. I saw Frank Urban's on here, so I have MSU is an investor, and this is great ways where they can do well with the money, but also help back into the community. And those by dollar amounts are probably more of our investors, but we still keep those corporations. Those are sort of our secret sauce, because what we have is that we have the limited partners, those large corporates as investors really want to get access to those companies, but also the VCs want to get access, and the corporations want to get access to these corporations as beta customers, as M&A partners, as understanding just the whole ecosystem. So we've been sort of in a middle where both sides really want each other, and we're a great way to leverage both of them to get better funds into Michigan, but also make sure that these corporations get access to some of this great innovation economy. So that
they can get in and invest in it. Now, I guess one thing that's maybe not clear for our listeners or for me is help us understand who the typical investor would be, or maybe a more dramatic way to put it is, why should they invest in Renaissance rather than a more typical VC? Give me an example of these two markets. I mean, they're both serving different purposes. They've both got different needs, and you guys yourselves are investing in VCs. So somebody might be justified in asking, well, why both? Why would I invest in you and not just directly into a VC? Because VCs do take corporate LPs
Yep,
as well.
without a doubt. I mean, it's more. It goes back even to my career when I was talking about when I was investing in companies. It was like 10 to 12 companies per fund. For us, it's hundreds of companies per fund. So, we now have probably over 500 indirect investments. So our economies of scale are much, much different. And again, just like investing in mutual funds, we have, diversification of risk, but also we have diversification of industry. So, when we talk to limited partners, there's probably something in our portfolio after 500, 600 companies that they can help to solve their problems. And again, it's not just, investing in these companies. It's sometimes it's innovation inside the IT department. It's innovation inside of HR. It's innovation all around these large corporations where we can help them, solve a problem that they have, and also help these small companies get beta customers and spin up quicker too.
And you're active in these things too. So you're a resource to your VCs, just like you would be to a company that you invest in.
Correct, without a doubt. Yeah, but we're also innovation. We're also partners with the limited partners, the people that corporates invest in us. We have a dedicated person, which a lot of people know Vince Nystrom on this call, and he's one of those people that we're a small team, but we dedicated a person basically to make those connections because we think it's so important for our ecosystem, but also just for what we're doing and the type of work we're doing.
How you guys are invested in a few companies, if I recall correctly from your website.
Yep.
It's not all investment in funds. There's some companies there. How is it the same or how is it different investing into a VC and their leadership team versus investing into a tech startup and their leadership team? What's the same? What's different?
Yeah, the biggest thing is you have a track record to look back on, and that's probably the most interesting part of it is that we're with these funds for a long time, and we can see them over 3 or 4 funds, how they invest, how they what the returns are. Where an entrepreneur, I mean, if they do 3 companies like Jeff Williams has done, yeah, those are great bets, but there's few and far between. In funds, you start to get a track record. The other side of it is, I mean, it's long time in a company, but it's even a longer time company in these funds. So, we're for good or bad with these people for, at least 10 years, probably much longer. So you really have to do your due diligence because you're getting the relationship with these people, and you want to make sure that they're going to represent you well and do what they said with your capital.
Now, I don't want to put you in a hard place, and we're going to talk about the businesses later. We're going to talk about the entrepreneurs later.
Good.
But are there any stories that you find yourself having to sort of tell over and over again amongst your VC investments? Because you have a unique position. Many VCs may have been on 1 or 2 VC teams prior to what they're doing, but now you're seeing a whole bunch of them all at once and getting to live with all of them all at once. It's sort of like in our business, we get to see a lot of startups, and it's a lot of ways we were a part of a few, but now we get to be part of many. What are the stories that you find yourself feeling the need to tell over and over again with that vantage point? What is the kind of education that the VC that may be listening to this, maybe that isn't part of your portfolio, needs to hear from what you've seen of many VCs?
The biggest thing or the harder thing for some of the newer, venture capital firms to understand is that we have options just like you do. I mean, where you see thousands of deals a year, I don't see thousands of VC firms, but I see hundreds of VC firms, and I can pick from them. And I usually get a very long look at these funds. I mean, there's funds now that we looked at them in 2008 when we started, and we're just starting to, consider them for investment. So that's probably the biggest thing that comes across is that, sometimes they may be the best thing in that area, but I just don't have a need in that. So it's not I don't have to invest in you. I have options. I have large options. So it's, sometimes it's flipping that script and making sure they understand that everybody's selling to something, and I'm selling to my limited partners too. So everybody has a boss or a customer.
What are you looking for then? Because it's, we talk a lot about startups and what are you looking for in a startup? But with this huge pool of VCs that you can pick from, what makes a good investment from your perspective?
I mean, returns matter a lot. I mean, we've all seen the ads, where it's like, past performance does not equal future performance. A lot of times it does in venture capital. There's been a lot of great, academic studies that sort of say corollary is definitely over 50, 60% if you have the same investors. The problem is that, it's a long vehicle, so it's very hard to get that track record. That usually means that your more institutional investors usually won't invest in a first-time fund because we want to see that track record. A lot of times you have people that spin out and get a track record in interesting ways, but track record matters a lot. Second part of it is always the general partners. I mean, you're giving these people your capital for a long period of time. You've got to be able to work with them. You got to be able to have beers with them. So again, people matter. And then again, it's like the last lens I'm sort of looking for is I'm looking for people that, want to invest in Michigan. So it has to mesh. I mean, MedTech, devices, great area. Manufacturing, IT, great area. Some of the consumer plays, so we're getting better at some of those, but those don't really fit. So I may invest or look at those, but they're usually an offside. Agriculture, another, MSU, another great shout out, basically, great area for Michigan. So I'm looking for all those areas. And then it's also just timing. I mean, I have a portfolio also, and I'm looking for portfolio construction. So sometimes I'm looking for an early IT fund, and I'm not looking for a late biotech fund. You know what I mean? And that just is just the timing issues. And VCs have the same issues. And it's like, I like your company, just can't invest right now because that's not my portfolio makeup.
It's not exactly the right thing for where I am right now in the cycle.
Exactly.
I remember when we talked before, Jeff, you had mentioned that there's a lot of not diversification, but there's a lot of siloing happening. I forget the word that you used, but specialization in domains
without
with
a doubt.
The VC world. So that, I presume, then means that you have selection from a lot of different people who can bring a particular specialization. And so you might shop that VC for your portfolio simply because, well, not simply because, but because they have that specialization there.
Yeah.
How does that work then? I think what you just told us is from this overarching perspective, looking to invest in them. What makes, because you're by some sense a little bit of a generalist then, a little bit opportunistic as to what is out there and what is happening. But you mentioned MedTech, you mentioned IT and manufacturing, you said not so much consumer, but you said from the perspective of how we do it in Michigan, what is your criteria there? Because you're not picking a specialization or a silo based on just I like IT right now per se. What is that criteria? What makes you say IT, manufacturing, MedTech, but maybe not consumer products? Is it just our Michigan ecosystem, or is there national trends that are driving that?
Yeah, there's national trends. We can have a long discussion. Even we had a long discussion last night. Sort of, med devices are really rough right now for investing. I mean, there's a death of capital for that, but that's driven by the markets too. I mean, the people on the other side are asking for more proof of concept. Basically, all the way to basically manufacturing and distribution. And so that means it's longer, where the bio-farmers are much earlier, I can IPO it. So it's driven by the market. It's also driven by what I think is going to play in Michigan. So agriculture is great in Michigan, but it's not a huge part of our portfolio because the exits haven't been amazing. I think that's changing now. Auto tech, great, sort of gone through a little bit of a valley, so there are trends, and I'm trying to make sure that, I'm broad enough that I'm not caught in a very small ecosystem. But I'm also making sure that I'm not, I'm not missing a trend or basically, missing some dollars there basically side of it. So the way, to generally ask your question, my portfolio is built up is it's like 40% IT, 40% healthcare, and healthcare, these are big, broad buckets where where venture capital firm being much more siloed. Then I have an emerging market, which is, not really emerging, but it's, these are agriculture, advanced materials. I mean, those are things Michigan does really well, and I want to invest in those. But we've got a bunch of other ones that are bubbling up that may or may not make that emerging market bucket and may make a whole big bucket. And then I look at things as early or late venture capital. They're seed, Series A, they're much more company formation, or they're farther along where it's like sort of more just, it's the proof of confidence there. It's just how big is it going to be? Are they going to help with the marketing, all the other side of it? So those are latest, and that's usually 50-50 in my portfolio.
So despite the sign behind you, I am trying to break your heart. If you say no, there's probably a reason for it. You're not actually just trying to break their heart at this point.
No, and that's every VC too. I mean, I think that's what a lot of entrepreneurs know is that they're in business, they say no thousands and thousands of times. So, if you listen to the no, and a good VC should tell you why they're saying no, or at least, verbalize it. You can learn a lot basically by correlating all that information and saying, okay, if somebody's telling me multiple times, it's probably true, or at least true in the market right now.
I remember when Jen Baird was on the show, that was one of the points that she was making, is one of the nicest things a VC can do for you is to say no, but with explanation as to why. Without
a doubt. And I try to do that to funds too. I mean, it's, and I try to do that to entrepreneurs, and sometimes it's taken well, sometimes it's not, but it's always coming from a point of trying to help you because it was the best thing for me as an entrepreneur, even as a fund manager. So
you need that input. Hey, while we're on that sign, you got to tell us what's the story behind the sign?
So it's a line from a song in Wilco. It's actually a song, I'm trying to break your heart. So it's a Wilco. It's an alt country band out of Chicago, Jeff Tweedy. So anybody else that likes alt country or will get the line. And we have so little joy in our life right now. It's like, okay, I'm just going to keep making things interesting around me. So and people can do a comment,
I think the longer this goes on, I'm going to need to start make chalk drawings on the gray wall behind.
You have to, exactly. I mean, exactly. It shows a little bit of yourself. It's like, hey, this is the way I find joy. Everybody finds it differently. So
I love it, Jeff. One more question about Renaissance before we go over. I want to talk about MVCA here for a little bit, but before we go there, why the direct investments? Why the individual direct investments? If you got this business model that says, hey, we're investing as a fund of funds, that makes sense. It's a cool thing. How do you then say, well, I'm going to go out and invest in these individual companies? Just the freedom to do so, or is there some more behind that?
Yeah, it was part of our thesis originally. Basically when we started it, we said, that we could, we had more access to these companies. A lot of times we've done a lot of these introductions to these, firms on there where, we were active sort of in saying, hey, you should look at this, VC firm, you should look at this company, you should look at this VC firm. And so we had some access to companies. And, a lot of it, they're all Michigan companies. They all had some Michigan tie to them. They all had a larger presence in Michigan. We sort of have gone away from that. I mean, we right now that thesis isn't as big as it, and even then it was a very small portion of my portfolio. So, it's out there, we may pick it up again, but we found out that right now we're better, we're doing really well on the funds, and we want to sort of double down on that.
Cool. That's awesome. Before we leave Renaissance, a couple of things in our chat here. Frank Urban mentioned, shout out to Renaissance. They not only attract VCs to the area, but they've met with small companies, mentored companies, and made introductions to the big VCs they fund, which I think we'll talk about that in a little bit. Without Renaissance, those interactions would likely not be possible. Really can't underestimate their impact on the ecosystem. Thanks, Frank. Yeah, that's cool. Francis Glory, our good friend Francis Glory, had a question here. How does Jeff decide how much he invests in a VC fund? How do you make those kind of decisions? And maybe while you're answering that, compare and contrast to the metrics that you might use for that versus if you're investing in a company.
It's sort of the same, that I talked about my breakdown. We have a spreadsheet basically where we say, okay, in agriculture, in healthcare, how much dollars do I have at work? Because a fund, some of our flagship is broken up into, okay, they're going to do 80% pharma, but they're going to do 20% agriculture. So I start, dividing those dollars up and putting them into buckets to make sure I'm creating a portfolio just like everybody. It's portfolio management, just it's at a longer scale and with bigger dollars. You know what I mean? So you want to have a little bit of that, a little bit of real estate, a little bit of growth. I'm doing a little bit of agriculture, a little bit of MedTech. So if I invest $4 million in a company fund versus $3 million, it's a lot of it's based on where my mix is, basically my portfolio.
I got to imagine the VCs would come to you like a startup with a plan saying, here's what we want to be able to address in this market that we're investing in, and we think we'll need about this much to do that well, and here's what kind of returns we think we can get.
That's exactly right. They have a thesis, they have a pitch deck, just like every other startup does. And it definitely it should talk about that. It should talk about their returns. It should talk about their thesis. Where do they see a gap? How can they have actually a outside return? What exactly is their thesis? And we're buying into the returns, but we're also buying into that vision. And we want them to follow that vision because again, we put them into a bucket and then they say, oh, there's a big, I'm not going to be MedTech devices. I'm going to be FinTech now. It's like, because there's a great opportunity. It's like, I put you in that bucket. I want you to do that bucket, even if it's, maybe not be perfect right now. That's what I bet on you for.
We do have another question here from Paul Reiser, and it's got a smiley face at the end, so it's going to be good. Our VCF is an awesome partner and model of leadership, their team and their business model for the state and country. We're lucky to have them. Let's hear a little bit about that Moderna investment.
Well, this is all, maybe I'll just have the chat talk nice things about me. So, I must have loaded it with nice people on the side.
I told them to be mean to you, so I don't know what's going on here.
I know. Yeah. Thank you. So it was a good article in Cranes just the other day. So we, early in 2009, basically we made an investment in Flagship, and at that time they had a great, Michigan presence. But one of their investments was Moderna, and so we got to see it very early, and we always thought it was an interesting vaccine and mRNA technology, but we never thought it would actually be part of a headline story where you turn on the late night shows and everybody's talking about Moderna now and having parody songs of Moderna. So we thought it was going to be a great investment. Sometimes you grab a dragon by the tail and it turns into something completely different. So we're very happy about the outcomes of that. But it's great to be just a little piece of that, very small little piece of that.
That's really exciting. Congratulations on that. Actually, the questions just keep coming in. I want to go to MVCA here in just a second, but we've got time to address these, so let's do it. How has VC interest changed in the COVID era from your perspective? It's interesting. We were talking with Lindsay Klee, whose expertise is reimbursement and coding. And she was saying from like an insurance perspective, that really hasn't changed too much. Sure, there's some interest in these things, but that doesn't mean the other stuff went away. So interesting. We're sort of doing a survey now of different industries. How has COVID changed VC interest?
Just I don't know. It was the same thing as everybody else. In the beginning of the pandemic, we immediately went back to 2008. 2008 was like atrocious for VCs. It was sort of a probably a worst case scenario. And so we all sort of did the same thing. Same triage we did during 2008. And the truth is, it really didn't happen. I mean, we sort of had we thought us making those capital calls are very important, and those never happened. So the money just kept flowing, and we sort of had a pause for 3 months. But now we're actually having everybody sort of catching up with those 3 months and 2 months time period. So we've seen large investments, the dollars going out, the funds are still being raised. Things are sort of back to normal, even better than back to normal. So probably the biggest thing has been the focus of the whole community sort of on biopharma. That just the spotlight, which was already red hot, in the VC world of how much investment's going in there and how many IPOs, it's just turned the whole subject into biopharma. So it's been even better in that area where it's been even more, more productive, more things going on basically in that space.
It does seem like there's a lot of domains where people have actually focused better during and after, well, not after, but during COVID.
Yeah.
Maybe it's extra time on our hands or we're not driving around as much, but yeah, interesting.
The interesting part is how deals are getting done. I mean, initially VC investing is a very one-on-one. I mean, it's very hands-on. We have lunch, we have dinners, we have lots of time to meet these people, and we want to make sure, because again, it's our investment, it's our time, but we are seeing some of the seed deals getting done all over Zoom. Where it's no personal interactions at all. Some of the later deals are still needing that personal interaction. There's people flying. There's people driving trains, a lot of things to get those deals done. But that's been probably the biggest innovation, is that, okay, they're saying I can write $100,000 check and not physically meet that person, and that's quite a leap for a venture capitalist. But we're hearing a lot of stories basically of that happening. So
how long will we have to wait for the outcome of that to know? I mean, I guess it's like the life cycle of those companies, but you'll probably get some early indicators as to whether there's a bigger percentage of those deals that you're wishing you had that face-to-face with versus not. I guess there's probably not an answer yet for that.
There isn't. I think it's just basically, by sheer having to do it. I mean, these venture capitalists, we deploy capital to them. We want them to put it to work, and their job is to put it to work. And if there's a pause for longer, they have to put the money to work. So it's sort of, they got to keep feeding the pipeline. So even, whatever's out there, we got to keep moving. So that's, I think, is really what's happening right now. But you're right. This is a long industry. To see any trend basically saying, okay, I didn't talk to this one. This one's all over Zoom. You need a lot of data points for that. And it takes a long time for that to happen. So right now the jury's still out. Yeah.
Well, speaking of lots of data points, not only do you get to see lots of VCs from the standpoint of Renaissance, which is really cool and a really neat model, but you're also the, I'm going to get it wrong here. It's the vice chairman of Michigan Venture Capital Association. And there you get to see a lot more VCs. And you guys I guess I'd like to give us a little bit of a background on MVCA, what it does, what its activities are, and also what you guys have learned over the years with that organization with regard to our region and with regard to VC in general.
Yeah, the MVCA is another quite special organization. There is a National Venture Capital Association, but Michigan Venture Capital Association, I think they're up, I don't even know, I should know how many years now. It's been a long time, but as a community of venture capitalists working together to help the whole ecosystem, it's one of the better, regional entities by far. We help with an annual report that's now almost 15 years old. So we have 15 years worth of data we get to comb through and spot those trends that we just talked about. And I'm head of that committee too, which is just amazing. A shout out to Entry Point too, also for helping us with Molly and Emily. But there's also, advocacy for us on, legislators, there's putting events together, there's networking. So they've been crucial sort of all over, of convening and helping out the whole industry and advocating for the whole industry in Michigan. And it's quite a gem that basically, again, we talk about community. I think this is going to be our trend for our discussion, that it takes a village to do these things. And MVCA is one of those things that we should definitely be proud of and nurture and make sure it doesn't go away.
That's really cool, and we've obviously seen a lot of cool things come out of there. Among other things, those reports and that data. What have you guys seen with respect to VC in Michigan? It does appear to continue to grow. I mean, it seems like that's something we still talk about the coastals and having to syndicate with the coastals and stuff. But my impression as an outsider to it is that it does continue to grow.
Yeah, the Midwest as a whole is still underserved, but, when you get into the Midwest, it ebbs and flows in Michigan. I mean, it's just like everything else. You got to look at a longer term. We have reached sort of a peak. We're doing a little bit of work to make sure that, that more firms stay here, but we had the Venture Michigan program, which was a huge shot in the arm. And that was sort of we had a big growth out of that. And we've had a little bit of changing. It'll be interesting to see what happens this year. I mean, we're usually average about 39, 40 firms and then dollars under capital. But, it's every year, it's sort of interesting to dig through that data and see, okay, just like your hospitalization beds, have we reached the top and we're going down? Have we just sort of had a plateau? I see sort of a plateauing going on, and hopefully it's not a downturn, because there are a lot of other regions. Michigan, there's other places they can go. Chicago's really hot, Illinois is really hot, Ohio's really hot, and those have programs sometimes that are more, situated around venture capital. You got to do it correctly, but those do help attract firms to the region.
So good. We hope it doesn't become a downturn,
Yep.
but certainly a little bit of a plateau here. Interesting. Very good. Well, let's talk about this community that we're all part of here. You've been part of it for a long time, and I love how you talk about your passion being the creation of jobs. And again, it's something that you can talk in platitudes about, but you're actually saying, what are ideas that are worth doing, that we have the talent for, and that we can really execute on, which is huge. If you did a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, on this sort of MedTech and life sciences ecosystem that we have here, specifically in the state of Michigan, but the region more generally, what are you most proud about? Where do you think the gaps are? Where have we stumbled? What can we do about it?
It's, we can have a huge conversation about this. I'm sure there's a lot of people.
This is
on
the next 3 hours of the show.
Yeah, I know.
Actually.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of other people on the call, can probably do a better job of this too. I mean, because I'm such at a higher level. I mean, in general, I mean, funding is we're probably blessed more in the MedTech area than a lot of regions are. I mean, and you take the manufacturing talent, with you guys and some of the design talent and the support areas, and then even the CEOs. I think we're actually doing pretty well. I think it's just an underserved area in general all around the country right now. So, you take pharma, it's Cambridge. I mean, Cambridge is 99% or 90% of the deals basically going on here. There is, hubs basically in Minneapolis and San Diego and, in the Michigan area for med devices, but it's mostly just, it's a lot of bootstrap and a lot of other, non-dilutive capital, different kind of capital coming in, because it's harder to raise capital on this, on that whole side of it. So, overall, I think we're doing well. I think it's just, we're waiting for the trends to change a lot of times.
See where they head next. You guys are doing something kind of cool these days with this A2EF organization that you're working on to try to get more communication. Anytime I hear about efforts to make communication and getting together happen, I'm just like, this is great. That's the one thing that I ever watch make a difference. And so we're very, very proud to hear that you're doing that. What can you tell us about A2EF?
I'm going to throw up a slide so I don't forget
Sure.
things, and and basically it'll use as a good way for me to talk through things. But the Ann Arbor Entrepreneurs Fund is sort of the latest passion I've been working on, and there's a lot of community members behind it right now too. So it's a concept that's worked in different with different names around the region. There's one that started off in Colorado and Texas that basically say, these entrepreneurs, when they first start out, you can pledge 1% of your profits, 1% of your, sort of your equity back to the community. And at that point, we all know that, the shares, are very, very low, side of it. So it's fairly easy at a time. And that gives you a way to basically, give back to the community when you really don't have a lot, way to give back. And what it does is also creates a community of people that all have the same need. We've got some great, early stage, things for the community now, but this is sort of more second stage. You've already created the company. You now need, an issue with growing and finding VC capital. So these are like-minded founders, usually very, high senior in the corporation that get together. These are the CEOs, CEFOs, that tap it to. And again, we're finding also that, attracting talent, this is something the millennials and the people in my kids' generation, they really want to have something that's not just profit driven, but also giving back to the community. So this gives a way to do that. And this, just starting up, the Ann Arbor Community Foundation is a great partner basically for making sure the capital that is generated from this goes to a good spot. And we've got a great, steering committee right now that I want to, give a shout out. We got Jen Baird again, which you talked about. She's helping out to it. We got Kathleen Craig, which is a, IT mobile company. Adrian Fortino from Mercury Fund, Bhushan from InfoReady Culinary, Doug Neal from eLab, and then, and Doug Song this is one of his passions forever. He's basically started up the concept and put a great gift together to get our executive director and everything. So I can't thank the Song family enough for doing this. But anybody who's on the call, I'd love to talk to you about it if it's interesting. That sounds like something that you really want to talk about. But it's been a work of passion for a while, and we're still in the beginning phases of it.
That's really cool. Who is eligible for something like this? Who should be reaching out if they're interested in it?
We're targeting high tech, high growth companies, and again, it's usually at a C level. Somebody who can pledge. So all the people I listed off. For me, I'm pledging part of my carry of my fund. Doug Neal is doing that. Adrian Fortino. So anybody who's in MedTech devices, pharma, all those, IT, anybody who's in that area, I think is a great solution. And somebody who wants to give back to the community and doesn't really, your mission always is to drive your company as a startup, but this is a way to do it sort of, and help yourself also with a great community of founders around you too at the same time.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. And we'll certainly take any questions from the audience about that effort. But it's really cool to see you guys giving back in that way and trying to make those resources. One of the things we've seen over the years again and again and again is it's really those connections and those communications. Everyone, it's so tempting to create the perfect pipeline or the perfect process or the perfect thing, but we're talking about, like you said, high tech, high growth things that meet emergent needs, and you can't invent the process to make that clockwork. It's always a new thing. That's why if it was easy, everyone would be doing it, right? And so
Yep.
to see you creating these kind of entities where people can get together, learn from each other, have the benefit of the shared community, I just really, really commend that, because we know that that's how you actually solve complex problems, is putting those resources together. You don't know what order they're going to need to be in, but you know that they'll all help, and that's just really powerful in what you guys are doing. We did have one more question here. This was back on the VC question. That was when MEDC created the VC fund of funds. We've got an influx of great VC firms in Michigan. It seems a lot of them left. Why do you think this is so? You mentioned a plateau. Why you say we're hoping this isn't a downturn? Any prognostication as to why some of this may be?
Money finds where it's most wanted, basically side of it. So, some of it is sort of normal attrition. People come in, they're attracted to a certain capital. Some of them are going to leave, so some of it was fairly normal that we had, attrition back and forth that we, expected. We'll see basically the long term. There are a lot of people that stayed too also, so it's, it definitely was a success. The Venture Michigan fund's also in that Moderna side of it too. So I think there's going to be some great returns basically on that side of it. It's, it's just a balancing act of where the government puts their capital and what matters. I don't expect every firm to stay, but we're doing a good job of basically getting people back into the system too. So
that's great. I'm going to ask the audience if they have any questions for Jeff. This would be your chance to raise your hand. We're going to talk a little bit more about entrepreneurs and what is good for them to know from Jeff's perspective, because you do work with entrepreneurs, and they're of all different types and flavors. But this would be a great chance. If you want to ask Jeff a question, do feel free to raise your hand in the Zoom call here, and we'll get to you as soon as you do that. But Jeff, I think where I wanted to sort of finish today was, for so many small business entrepreneurs, they aspire to getting funding, they aspire to getting their devices cleared or their product on the market, and they want to walk this path. What advice do you have for our community and those folks who are out there on the ground level with the ideas, and they want to make that step forward, and they're going to benefit from hearing from you today, they're going to benefit from all the connections that can be made? What do they need to hear?
I try to tailor where they're at, but the trend I see basically across, from early to later stage companies or wherever they're at sort of in the pipeline. And a lot of times it's, sometimes it's when they're later companies, it's reminding them of too, is that, understanding exactly what the venture capitalists, what their job is and what they need sometimes too, because, if you understand their business model, as long as, again, they're just another form of customer. I mean, your patient's your customer, your insurance company's your customer, your hospital is your customer, but your VC is also a customer. They're trying to get an outcome also side of it. So again, if you understand what they're trying to, as their outcome, you can tailor what you're trying to pitch to them and understand that you may be a fit, you may not be a fit, but also will get you quicker to making sure you're really giving the right pitch to the right VC at the right time.
Yeah, that's huge. Tailoring it to that. I think when you and I talked before, we both had a very shared interest in focusing on the needs of others. And if you don't understand the need of your investor or of your market or of your customers or your employees or anything else, we're just not doing the right thing here. So I love the simplicity of that. And I suppose in your case, it applies to all the different levels that you work with.
Correct. And it's not simple. It's one of those things. It's like, and it's hard to always, we all want to focus on our problems, but the problem, basically the solutions to our problems is helping other people usually. That's where I try to come back to. And, even as, when you talk to students and things like that, it's making sure that they understand that, if you solve your employer's problem, you're going to be a huge success. Even if you're not doing an entrepreneurial startup, if you think like you're your own corporation, your own, machine, you're going to be, highly successful because you're focusing on the problems of your boss or of your whole company. And that's, I can't see how you can't succeed basically, but it's hard to wake up every day and make sure that you're trying to think that way.
It certainly is. It takes that, got to take your eyes off yourself and ask, what does the person next to me need? Which is right about now is just a good message for all of us as we walk through this whole thing
Without
together.
a doubt. Yep.
Well, not seeing any more questions in the chat. I do have to ask you one more question, Jeff. I got to know
Sure.
about the lava lamps. Where are the lava lamps?
I think it's the same thing. Again, building joy into your side of it. I love lava lamps. I've had, when I was at our desk, I had a bunch of lava lamps on my desk, and I think they're the coolest thing. I love entropy, and I love that side of it too. So I think that's another fun thing to watch.
I love it. We're gonna have chalk drawings on the wall here by next week. After you've
I hope so. I'm looking forward to that. I'll see that. Yeah. I see that. It's everybody versus everybody versus COVID.
I love it. We also do have a question from our friend Ken Spencer, who is live with us on the line. Ken.
Hey, Jeff, thanks very much. Excellent presentation. When you're looking to invest in a medical device company, is a prerequisite for investment that they have FDA approval already?
In our sense, I wouldn't invest in directly but again, it depends on. Usually, what I do is I reference them to a firm, and again, it depends on the firm. There are a number of them that, yes, without a doubt, and that's usually what we're seeing now is more of the firms are going after FDA or very close to FDA. There's very few that are doing early side of it. And I can maybe name like 3 or 4. And so we're definitely seeing that that's a smaller slice of the pie than it used to be.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question, Ken. Yeah, I was talking with John Freshley, who you recommended, Jeff, and he's going to come on the show in January, but it's fascinating to talk with him about the difference between devices where you pretty much are going to have that clearance before you really see the big investment, and within the realm of therapeutics where, oh my goodness, you're so far back in that road. I think the comment he made to me was you just got to get to the beginning of the process. And so it's really interesting to see those nuances. Ken, thanks for the question. We appreciate that. Well, with that, we'll leave the last word to Jeff, and love to hear your last thoughts on anything we've said today or the community, but we really appreciate you being here.
No, I have to go back and say thank you, Gene, for doing this. I love what's happening in the med device and even the biopharma, the whole healthcare in Michigan. I think this. There have been some great things that came out of COVID, and one of them is this, basically side of it. But it's also, even before COVID, we had A2 Biosocial that's happening. This is, the tech community had that with A2 New Tech Meetup and all those things that were happening. And I think, if we can get one great thing out of this, if this continues afterwards, I think it's going to be great for the whole region. I think we're helping a number of companies and a number of entrepreneurs that coming out of this, and I'm looking forward to all this, and so I can't thank you enough for doing it.
Well, thanks for being here and making it what it is. To each and every one of you who is listening, and Jeff Rinvelt, our guest today, thanks for being here.